today, it doesn't matter what their name is. WTF may be a very good name for this organization, maybe a very good name, but it doesn't change and alter who they are underneath. And I'm glad that you brought that up. And
reclaiming my time. It's also important to note the American people are smart, but somebody at this administration continues to give CARE access to the White House, to the administration, continues to listen to them. And I know a gentlelady from Minnesota and I were there to go through the materials that were purged from FBI training materials, and you actually came back and went through some additional materials later that I didn't, the only one to have done that. And it's interesting again to me that it was CARES complaining. Here they are, a Muslim Brotherhood Front organization, according to the courts, and they complain about instruction on radical Islam, and the material is removed. And at the same time, another organization, the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, was also one of those mentioned, a named co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. And ISNA's president, Muhammad Majid, Imam Muhammad Majid, has, you know, every time we hear about him, it seems like it's another piece of influence he has had on the White House. And I know I've even read a speech given by the Chief of Staff of the President himself, Dennis McDonough, when he was the Deputy National Security Advisor. He spoke at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, ADAMS, Adams, and I'm sure John Adams appreciates this, but he spoke at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society and thanked Imam Majid for his wonderful prayers during the Iftar celebration at the White House. We know the head of ISNA, Imam Majid, has been in the center of the State Department. Was there when President Obama gave a speech. He was supposedly had helped him with his speech about the Middle East, which explains why there were problems with things the President said in his speech that were an insult to Israel and not factually accurate. So just as the letter that we signed, 5 different letters, 5 different statements of fact in each of those 5 letters, but just as they pointed out, we know there is Muslim Brotherhood influence in each of those departments. All we were asking for, not an indictment, just please investigate your department, as this limited IG inspection did at Justice of the FBI, and tell us how extensive or how little the influence is. We know there's some there, so is it very little? Is it great? And it's still a legitimate question, and I think in view of the IG report, it's time to revise our letter to the Department of Justice and make further inquiries, because there's more information the gentlelady from Minnesota and I have obtained that indicate it's an even bigger problem than we knew at the time that those letters were sent. And I would yield to my friend from Minnesota.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding. I think one thing that absolutely shocked me was in the month of June, when an individual who was the chief deputy of the spiritual advisor of the Muslim Brotherhood, Qaradawi is the spiritual advisor for the Muslim Brotherhood, his deputy, whose name Bin Baya, was granted a visa by the United States State Department to come into the United States. Now, that's pretty unusual. You have a terrorist organization that was outlawed in Egypt formerly, and the United States government is issuing a visa to the chief deputy of the spiritual advisor of the Muslim Brotherhood. That in itself should kind of raise concern. Not only was he granted a visa, he came into the United States this June. He had a meeting in the White House. How do we know that? Bin Baya put a photo up on his website and bragged about this meeting that he had, and he said it was in the White House, in the executive office's building. He named the people. There were people obviously in the photo. And he said during the course of that meeting, he came in and requested that the White House give arms and training and weapons to terrorists that would be fighting in Syria. That was what the request was that he made. That's in his words. That's not my words. That was been by his words on his website. Well, just this last Monday, not the Monday of this week, but the Monday before, on the same day as the tragic shooting of 13 people at the Naval Yards here in Washington, D.C., just 2 miles from where the Representative Gohmert and I are standing today, Mr. Speaker. On that same day, President Obama signed a waiver to the Arms Export Control Act. Nobody heard about it because it was a big news day. 13 Americans were gunned down that day by an individual. But this is very big news because President Obama, when he signed this waiver of Section 40 and Section 40A of the Arms Export Control Act, what he did is waive the prohibition against the United States arming terrorists, including Al-Qaeda, in Syria. And this isn't Michelle Bachmann saying this. This isn't Representative Louis Gohmert saying this. This is the White House saying this, and also major news reports coming out that the President signed this waiver. Now, I want to just repeat it, because this was hard for me to understand when I heard this, that our President of the United States, Barack Obama, this is not meant to insult him in any way. It's just meant to inform the American people. He signed a waiver from the prohibition. It would make sense that we would prohibit spending U.S. tax money to arm terrorists. That would make sense, that we wouldn't want to do something like that. No arming of terrorists, especially Al-Qaeda. We've only been trying to fight them and defeat them for 12 years, minimum, more than that. But a week ago Monday, President Obama chose to waive that prohibition, and as myself and Representative Gohmert are standing on the floor today in this greatest of all deliberative bodies in the world, it is a fact today in the United States that our President has intentionally chosen to arm terrorists, including Al-Qaeda. Now, I think it's important that the American people know that our President signed that piece of legislation, or not legislation, waiver. Because if that was legislation that came on this floor, I don't think you would find Democrat members of Congress who would be willing to vote for that measure. I don't believe they would. Because one thing I know about this Congress, we're pretty bipartisan when it comes to national security. I don't care what your political background is, you want this country safe. And I'm very, very proud of what I've seen coming from Democrats and Republicans working together because we want national security. But this is a big issue. And that's why I think it's very important that Representative Gohmert is bringing up this issue, Mr. Speaker, about the level of influence of the violent terrorist organization known as the Muslim Brotherhood, what their presence is in the United States, and most particular, what their influence is on our United States government.
Reclaiming my time, that is an extraordinary development, our President deciding after America rose up so clearly with basically one voice saying, do not get us involved in Syria. I know in my own office we had heard from, I think, 3 people who did not live in our district, and between 1,400 that did, saying, do not get involved in the war in Syria. And we knew at the time that the largest part of the rebels were Al-Qaeda linked. We knew that the President Assad was backed by Iran and Hezbollah and was Shia. We knew that the rebels, the largest part of them, were Sunni Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, and there's no reason to get in the middle of that. And frankly, that's why, since we know so much about the Muslim Brotherhood terrorist activities abroad, despite CNN's reporting and so many reporting about the so-called coup in Egypt, we know, the lady from Minnesota and I, having been in Egypt in the last few weeks and talking to so many people and doing our own homework, that was not a coup. And the Coptic Christian Pope told both the lady from Minnesota and me that that was not a coup. That was the Egyptian people rising up. And I did not know, maybe the gentlelady from Minnesota knew, I did not realize that the Constitution in Egypt that America supposedly gave them advice about didn't have a provision for impeachment. So when they had a Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer as the president who was disregarding the Constitution, there was no way they could bring impeachment charges to get him out. They had one answer, one solution, and they acted peacefully, and millions more than ever has protested in the history of the world, came out to the streets and demanded the Egyptian military remove the president. And they did so, and he's awaiting trial. And I'm hoping they'll wait until newly elected officials are present so that they can have the trial of former President Morsi in front of a new regime that's elected by the people. But we didn't help give them any options there, and yet so much of the mainstream media has been reporting as the Muslim Brotherhood has been killing Christians, killing moderate Muslims, just destroying, burning churches. The mainstream media has continued to report that it's basically the military when it's not the military at all. It's the Muslim Brotherhood, and they have made clear they'll burn the country down. They'll kill everybody they can in order to get Egypt back under radical Islamic control, because for those that envisioned a new Ottoman Empire, envisioned the beginning of a worldwide caliphate, they could not afford, in their dream of running the world as one massive radical Islamic caliphate, they couldn't afford to lose Egypt, and they were willing to do whatever violence they had to avoid that. And as the gentlelady has mentioned, the Muslim Brotherhood now, it's been outlawed in Egypt. And I really applaud the efforts in Egypt of the people. It is, and I couldn't help but be amused by some of the mainstream and then some of the far left wing reporting that by my coming here to the floor and showing blow-ups of pictures and giving speeches here about what the Egyptian people were doing in rising up, and that they were upset, not with America. They showed by their signs they love America. They were upset with our president. And frankly, I didn't even know, in my own ignorance, I didn't even know who our ambassador was. But the people of Egypt knew. They had signs out there. They were upset with her. They were upset with the Obama administration. But they loved America. And somehow, by my reporting of the Egyptian people rising up and being upset with this administration, of supporting radical Islamic leaders. The gentleman's time has expired. Well, then I will yield back, but I thank the gentlelady from Minnesota for her valuable input. And the gentleman yields back. Thank
you, Mr. Speaker.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wilson, for 30 minutes.
Pop this in half. Mr. Speaker, this is my own little filibuster in the House of Representatives. I simply cannot stay quiet when a crowning achievement for the American people is under attack. The term Obamacare was coined by Republicans in 2010 to mock the Affordable Care Act. Well, this is one place where I agree with the Republicans. I believe that Obamacare is the perfect name for the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act is proof that Obama cares. He cares about America's families. He cares about mothers. He cares about fathers. He cares about young people. He cares about babies. He cares about seniors. He cares about the future of the American people. Yes, Obama cares. We know that Obama cares because insurance companies can no longer deny 17 million children with pre-existing conditions health coverage. We know that Obama cares because 105 million Americans with life-threatening diseases no longer have to live in fear of maxing out on their lifetime dollar limits on their insurance coverage. We know that Obama cares because more than 3 million young people up to age 26 can now have coverage because insurance companies can no longer remove them from their parents' plans. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to say that the people in Congress who oppose Obamacare do not care, but I need help in understanding this dilemma. Where do they live? Who do they represent? Who could oppose health care for their constituents? The opponents of Obamacare have not proposed a single serious alternative to provide health care coverage. Their constituents get sick too. Have these members of Congress ever been sick? Have they ever had a sick family member without insurance coverage? Have they ever been to a public emergency room? They should be afraid for their neighbors, their friends and family who may someday become jobless, uninsured, and sick. They will lose everything that they own. Who do these people represent? Do they represent robots? Do they feel? Do they bleed? Do they have pain? Members of Congress should be encouraging people to get coverage and expand access to health care. We can stop the crisis of uninsurance that is killing people, draining our tax dollars, and degrading our health system. Instead, too many legislators are spreading myths and half-truths about the only plausible plan that exists right now to end our health care crisis. Obamacare is not a government takeover. To the contrary, it is an improvement on our private, free, market-oriented health care system. You will have choices. You will have access. If you are unemployed with no health care, you will likely get it. If you are unemployed, right now, if you are employed with health care, you will likely experience no change. No change in your present health care coverage. If you are on Medicare, do not be frightened. You will experience no changes in your Medicare coverage. The federal government is simply making it easier and cheaper for people who have no insurance to get insured. The federal government will subsidize your health care bills according to your income status. Obamacare is trying to ensure that no one's livelihood is destroyed by a serious illness. When I was an elementary school principal, I worked to help a homeless family whose children were attending my school. The father was a professional man, an optician, whose life was destroyed when he hit his lifetime cap for health coverage because of serious medical conditions related to sickle cell anemia. They suffered. They lost everything: their home, their dignity, their health. The whole school joined in to help them through this crisis. This family was forced to work incredibly hard to survive. They would not have had to face such a hardship if the Affordable Care Act's protections were in place. We know that Obamacare is about women because pregnancy can no longer be considered a pre-existing condition. We know that Obamacare is about young people because young people, the likeliest to be involved in auto crashes or motorcycle crashes or drug use, will be insured. They are not invincible as they so often believe. As it stands now, someone has to pick up the tab when they make a mistake. They need to be insured. Have you been to a public emergency room lately? It's a nightmare. People everywhere suffering, waiting endlessly for their turn. So many of these patients are not insured and cannot pay. So not only do they suffer, but the taxpayers and public health system also suffers. The costs are passed on down the line. What a relief it would be for our public hospitals and for the taxpayers if we could ensure that every person in America that was eligible has health insurance. This is about fiscal responsibility. People want to be insured. They want the peace of mind and stability. Obamacare is about the economic future of this nation because the Affordable Care Act ensures that Americans pay for all the health care services they use. Preventive care would save so much money and save so many lives. Mr. Speaker, no one said that this would be easy. Progress is never easy. We went through this struggle with Social Security in 1935. Before Social Security, citizens suffered and died in poverty. Social Security provoked a tremendous backlash from conservatives. Members of Congress even fought to strip domestic workers and agricultural workers of their benefits in order to keep African Americans out of the system. We had to fight, but we ultimately succeeded in building a Social Security system that keeps tens of millions of Americans out of poverty. We have come a long way. We went through this struggle with Medicare in 1965. Back then, Republicans, including then California Governor Ronald Reagan, declared that Medicare was a Soviet-style health model and the end of freedom in America. But we ultimately succeeded in building a health care system for the elderly that prevents untold suffering and death. Obamacare is about 30 million lives. October 1st, 2013, it's about marching forward in the proud tradition of Social Security and Medicare. It's about marching toward the goal of a society that truly cherishes human life. Nobody said that it would be easy. We knew it would be difficult. We knew it would be hard. We've been here before. We fought hard and we won. And we're on our way to another crowning achievement in the history of this nation. simply because Barack Hussein Obama cares. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. I send to the desk a privileged report from Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 361, resolution waiving a requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 with respect to consideration of certain resolutions reported from the Committee on Rules and relating to consideration of the Senate amendment to the bill H.R. 2642 to provide for the reform and continuation of agricultural and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes.
Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
The House of Representatives today began work on legislation to give 2,400 acres of federal land in Arizona to a mining company in exchange for 5,000 acres of company land. A final passage vote on that bill is set for tomorrow. The House coming in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Eastern, votes at 10 o'clock, and that'll do it for legislation. We're just getting news this evening that the House will be in on Saturday, meeting at 10 o'clock Eastern on Saturday for morning hour, noon for legislative business, and they are also expected to meet on Sunday. We will have live coverage, of course, with the House gaveling in tomorrow and this weekend here on C-SPAN. And some tweets from members of Congress about that funding bill. This is from Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake saying not supporting